The resignation letter feels like it weighs nothing in my hands, just a single piece of cream-colored paper that represents 2 weeks of agonizing deliberation, 3 sleepless nights, and the desperate hope that I can escape both the prison of my marriage and the increasingly dangerous fascination I've developed for the man whose office I'm about to enter. But as I raise my knuckles to knock on the heavy mahogany door, marked with a brass plate reading, Damiano Corvus, Chief Executive Officer, my hand trembles so violently that I have to pause and take 3 steadying breaths before I can even announce my presence. The bruise on my collarbone throbs beneath the silk scarf I've wrapped artfully around my neck, a reminder of Marcus's fury this morning when he discovered the secret bank account I'd been feeding with tiny increments of my salary for the past 8 months. Money I'd been saving for the exact moment I'm living right now, the moment I finally gather enough courage to walk away from everything, from my husband's fists and his charming public facade, from this job that pays too well to be entirely legal, from the dark-eyed man on the other side of this door who looks at me sometimes with an intensity that makes my skin feel too tight and my breath catch in ways that have nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the kind of wanting that could destroy what little remains of my carefully controlled life. "Come in, Serafina." Damiano's voice carries through the thick wood before I even knock, rich and smooth like aged whiskey, with that faint Italian accent that becomes more pronounced when he's angry or amused, and I wonder not for the first time how he always seems to know when I'm standing outside his door, as if he has some 6th sense attuned specifically to my presence. I push the door open and step into his domain, this corner office that occupies the entire northeastern section of the 54th floor of Corvus Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the city like a kingdom spread out for a king's inspection. And the late afternoon sun streams through the glass, casting everything in shades of amber and gold that should feel warm, but instead make the space feel like the inside of a gilded cage. Damiano doesn't look up from the documents spread across his massive desk, his dark hair falling slightly over his forehead as he signs something with the kind of decisive strokes that characterize everything he does. And I take the opportunity to study him the way I've been stealing glances for 2 years. The sharp angle of his jaw that looks carved from marble, the broad shoulders that strain slightly against his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, the elegant hands that move with such precision, whether he's signing contracts or, as I've occasionally glimpsed through his open door, cleaning the gun he keeps in his desk drawer, with the same meticulous care most men reserve for vintage cars. "You're standing in the doorway like you're about to flee, which tells me this isn't your usual end-of-day report," he observes, without lifting his gaze from his paperwork. And the casual accuracy of his assessment sends a chill down my spine, because Damiano Corvus has always seen too much, noticed too many things I thought I'd hidden perfectly, like the way I sometimes arrive at work with makeup slightly heavier than usual, or how I've started wearing higher collars and longer sleeves even in summer. I force my feet to carry me across the plush carpet, each step feeling like I'm walking toward either salvation or damnation, and I can't quite decide which outcome terrifies me more as I approach the desk and place my resignation letter on top of his documents, with hands that have finally stopped shaking, because some part of me has decided to commit fully to this moment, to this choice, to whatever consequences follow. He stares at the paper for a long moment, still not looking at me, and then he does something I don't expect. He laughs, but it's not a sound of amusement. It's dark and dangerous, and makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up in a response that my body recognizes as the appropriate reaction to a predator who's just spotted prey trying to escape. "No," he says simply, finally lifting those obsidian eyes to meet mine, and I feel the full force of his attention like a physical weight pressing against my chest, making it difficult to breathe as he leans back in his leather chair with the kind of lazy grace that reminds me of big cats right before they pounce. "I don't accept this, Serafina, so you can take this ridiculous piece of paper and return to your desk and we can pretend this conversation never happened." The dismissal in his tone should make me angry, should make me grab my letter and storm out. But instead I find myself rooted to the spot. frozen under his gaze as he rises from his chair with fluid movement that brings him around the desk until he's standing close enough that I can smell his cologne. Something expensive and complex with notes of bergamot and cedar that probably costs more than my monthly rent. And I have to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact, because he's easily 6'3" to my 5'6". And the difference in our heights has never felt more pronounced than it does in this moment, when he's looking down at me with something in his expression that I can't quite name, but that makes my pulse race in ways that have nothing to do with the fear I should be feeling. I need to leave, I manage to say, hating how my voice comes out breathy and uncertain instead of firm and professional, and I try to take a step backward to reestablish some distance between us. But I've forgotten that his desk is directly behind me, and my hip bumps against the solid wood, effectively trapping me between the furniture and Damiano's looming presence. I've accepted another position, something in a different field, entirely, and I start in 2 weeks, so I'm giving you the courtesy of proper notice, which is more than— My words cut off abruptly as his hand shoots out faster than I can track, his fingers gripping my chin with a firmness that doesn't hurt, but absolutely cannot be escaped, tilting my face up toward the light from the windows, and his eyes narrow as he studies my features with the same intense focus he applies to complex contracts and business strategies that I've never quite understood, because they seem to involve more cash transactions and coded language than any legitimate enterprise should require. "What is this?" he asks, in a voice that's dropped at least an octave, becoming something rough and dangerous, and his thumb brushes along my jawline in a gesture that might seem tender, if not for the leashed violence I can feel radiating from his tense shoulders as his gaze fixes on something that makes his expression transform into something absolutely murderous. I realize with creeping horror that the scarf I'd wrapped so carefully this morning has shifted during my walk to his office, sliding down just enough to expose the edge of the bruise Marcus left when he slammed me against the kitchen counter, his hands around my throat while he screamed about betrayal and trust, and how dare I hide money from him, like he was some kind of monster instead of my loving husband who only wanted what was best for us. "Who touched you, Serafina?" Damiano's question comes out with such cold fury that I actually flinch, and his grip on my chin gentles immediately, his thumb now stroking my skin in what I think is meant to be a soothing gesture but only serves to make my heart pound harder, because I've seen Damiano angry before. I've watched him destroy business rivals with calculated precision, witnessed him reduce grown men to stammering apologies with nothing but a look. But I've never seen him like this, with his control visibly fraying and something primal and possessive burning in his eyes that makes me feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff with the wind trying to push me over. "It's nothing," I lie automatically. The same lie I've told myself and everyone else for the past 2.5 years. The lie that's become so practiced it almost sounds convincing. And I try to pull away from his grip. But his other hand comes up to cut my face, holding me in place with a gentleness that contradicts the fury in his expression as he carefully, deliberately adjusts my scarf to fully expose what I've been hiding. The bruise is spectacular in its ugliness, spreading across my collarbone and up the side of my neck in shades of purple and green and yellow. And I watch Damiano's jaw clench so hard I can hear his teeth grind together as he traces the edges of the mark with fingers that shake slightly with the effort of maintaining his control. And something inside my chest cracks open because I can't remember the last time anyone touched me with anything approaching gentleness, can't remember the last time someone looked at my pain with anything other than indifference or, in Marcus's case, satisfaction at a lesson well taught. "Nothing," he repeats flatly, and then his hands drop away from my face, but before I can feel relieved about the restoration of proper boundaries between employer and employee, he's moving past me to his desk, pressing a button on his phone that I know connects him directly to Vex, his head of security, a terrifying woman with arms covered in tattoos and eyes that miss absolutely nothing. "Clear my schedule for the rest of the day, and make sure we're not disturbed for any reason short of the building being on fire. And even then, use your judgment about whether it's worth the interruption," he says into the speaker, his voice perfectly controlled and professional, despite the tension I can see in every line of his body. And then he's turning back to me with an expression that I've seen him wear when negotiating deals that involve millions of dollars and men's lives. An expression that says he's made a decision and nothing in heaven or hell will change his mind. Sit down, Serafina, because you're not leaving this office until you tell me everything, and I mean absolutely everything, about how you got that bruise and any others you're hiding under those carefully selected clothes. I should refuse, should tell him that my personal life is none of his business, no matter how generous my salary or how much time we spend working together in close quarters, should grab my resignation letter and walk out of this office and never look back. But instead, I find myself sinking into one of the leather chairs positioned in front of his desk. My legs suddenly too weak to support my weight, as 2 years of carefully maintained secrets begin crumbling under the weight of his relentless attention. I can't tell you, I whisper, and even I can hear the defeat in my voice, the exhaustion that comes from carrying too many lies for too long, from pretending that my life is normal and my marriage is fine, and I'm not slowly dying inside from the effort of maintaining the facade. If I tell you, if anyone finds out, I can't finish the sentence because giving voice to Marcus's threats makes them too real, makes this moment too real, and I'm not sure I'm ready to face what comes next if I step off this cliff I've been teetering on for so long. He'll what? Damiano prompts, coming around to lean against the front of his desk, positioning himself directly in my line of sight, and he crosses his arms over his chest in a posture that might look casual, if not for the coiled tension I can see in his shoulders, the way his hands are clenched into fists that his crossed arms can't quite hide. He'll hurt you worse than he already has? He'll kill you? He'll make you disappear? Each question lands like a physical blow, and I realize that Damiano has already figured out the truth, has, probably known for longer than I want to consider, has been waiting with the patience of a hunter for me to finally admit what he's already concluded. Your husband did this to you, he continues, and it's not a question but a statement delivered with such certainty that I don't even try to deny it. Just nod once, a tiny movement that feels like surrender, and I watch something dark and absolutely terrifying cross Damiano's face before he schools his expression back into something approximating civilized. Marcus Thorne, investment banker at Pemberton and Associates, married to you for 3 years, no children, recently promoted to senior vice president, drives a silver Audi, plays golf at the Riverside Country Club on Sundays, and has been systematically destroying you piece by piece while the world sees only his charming smile and perfect manners. The level of detail in his recitation shocks me into meeting his eyes, and I see something there that makes my breath catch because it's not just anger I'm seeing, but something that looks disturbingly like possession, like ownership, like the kind of jealous fury that has no place in a professional relationship between a boss and his secretary. And I should be terrified by that look. But instead I feel something dangerous unfurl in my chest, something that whispers that maybe, just maybe, I'm not as alone as I've felt for the past 3 years. How do you know all of that? I ask, even though part of me doesn't want to hear the answer because it will confirm what I've suspected, but never wanted to acknowledge. That Damiano Corvus has been paying attention to every aspect of my life with an intensity that goes far beyond appropriate employer interest. That his eyes following me around the office weren't my imagination. That the raises and bonuses that always seemed to arrive exactly when I needed them most weren't coincidence, but careful calculation. Because I make it my business to know everything about the people who belong to me, he says with such casual possessiveness that I should protest, should remind him that I'm an employee, not a possession, that I belong to no one but myself. But the words stick in my throat because some dark, broken part of me wants to belong to someone who looks at my pain with fury instead of satisfaction, who sees my bruises and wants to destroy whoever put them there instead of adding more. And before you try to correct me with some speech about professional boundaries and appropriate workplace relationships, understand that I stopped being your employer and you stopped being just my secretary approximately 18 months ago when I watched you walk into work with a split lip. You'd covered with too much makeup, and I decided that your bastard husband was living on borrowed time. The confession should shock me, should send me running from this office and this building, and this man who's apparently been planning violence on my behalf without my knowledge. But instead, I feel tears burning behind my eyes because someone has finally seen what I've been hiding. Someone finally cares enough to be angry about the wounds Marcus has inflicted. And I don't know whether I want to laugh or cry at the realization that my salvation might come in the form of a man who's infinitely more dangerous than my husband could ever dream of being. He knows about you, I hear myself saying, the words tumbling out before I can stop them, and Damiano's expression sharpens with predatory interest as he leans forward slightly, giving me his complete attention in a way that makes me feel simultaneously exposed and protected. Marcus, he knows I work for you, knows exactly who you are and what people say about you, and he's been asking questions, wanting to know about your meetings and your calls and who comes to visit you. And when I couldn't tell him anything because I don't know anything beyond managing your legitimate business calendar and correspondence, he started. I break off, unable to finish. But I see understanding dawn in Damiano's eyes, see his expression transform from merely angry to something absolutely lethal. And I realize I've just handed him a piece of information that changes everything, that transforms this from a simple case of domestic violence into something much more dangerous and complex. Your husband married you because you work for me, Damiano says slowly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, which somehow makes it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. And I watch him process this revelation with the same sharp intelligence he applies to corporate warfare and business strategy. He targeted you specifically, courted you deliberately, married you with the explicit purpose of gaining access to information about my operations. And when you couldn't provide that intelligence because you're too smart and too loyal to betray my trust, he began using his fists to punish you for his own failures as a spy. Each word falls between us like stones dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward to disturb the surface of my carefully constructed reality. And I feel something inside me shatter at the confirmation of what I've suspected for months, but never wanted to believe, that my entire marriage was a lie, that Marcus never loved me, that I was nothing but a tool to be used and discarded in some game I don't understand and never wanted to play. The tears come then, hot and shameful, streaming down my face despite my best efforts to maintain some shred of dignity in front of this man who has just exposed the pathetic truth of my existence. And I expect Damiano to hand me a tissue and tell me to pull myself together the way Marcus does when my emotions inconvenience him. But instead he's suddenly there, kneeling in front of my chair, with his hands on my knees, his face level with mine, and his eyes burning with an intensity that steals my breath. Listen to me very carefully, Serafina, because I'm only going to say this once, he begins, his voice low and rough with barely contained violence, and one of his hands moves up to cup my face, his thumb brushing away my tears with a gentleness that seems impossible from a man whose reputation includes whispered stories of bodies that disappear and enemies who learn too late that crossing Damiano Corvus is a fatal mistake. You're not quitting, you're not going home to that bastard tonight or any other night, and you're sure as hell not starting some other job in 2 weeks, because as of this moment, you're under my protection, which means you're moving into my penthouse where I can keep you safe while I handle the Marcus Thorne problem in ways that will ensure he never touches you or anyone else ever again. The declaration should terrify me, should send me scrambling for the door, because I'm being offered a trade of one cage for another, one controlling man for another who's infinitely more dangerous. But instead I feel something like relief flooding through my veins because for the first time in 3 years, someone is offering to stand between me and Marcus's fists. Someone is promising protection instead of pain. And I'm tired enough and broken enough and desperate enough that I don't even care about the price I'll have to pay for Damiano's particular brand of salvation. I can't just leave everything, I protest weakly, even though we both know I've already made my decision. That the moment I walked into this office with my resignation letter, I was really asking for exactly this. For someone to take the choice out of my hands and make the impossible decision I've been too afraid to make for myself. I have things at the apartment, and Marcus will notice if I don't come home. And what about my car and my phone and... will all be handled by my people while you sit here in my office and drink the brandy I'm about to pour you, because you're shaking so hard you're about to fall out of that chair. Damiano interrupts, standing up and moving to the credenza where he keeps crystal decanters of various expensive liquors. And I watch him pour amber liquid into 2 glasses, with steady hands that contrast sharply with my own trembling fingers when he presses one of the glasses into my palm. Your husband is currently being detained at his office by a very thorough IRS audit that my accountant arranged to begin approximately 20 minutes ago, which gives us plenty of time to collect your belongings and relocate you somewhere he'll never think to look, specifically the top floor of this building where I can guarantee your safety. He settles into the chair next to mine, instead of returning to his position of power behind the desk, and the casual intimacy of sitting beside me instead of across from me feels significant somehow, like we're crossing a line that can never be uncrossed, moving from employer and employee into something darker and more complicated that I don't have the courage to name. Why are you doing this? I ask, finally voicing the question that's been echoing in my head since he touched my bruise with such careful fury, since he knelt before me and made promises that sound more like vows than reassurances from a concerned boss. You could just accept my resignation, let me disappear into whatever life I managed to build for myself, but instead you're offering me protection and making threats against my husband and acting like— I pause, searching for the right words, trying to articulate the feeling that's been growing between us for 2 years. This dangerous awareness that sparks every time our fingers brush while exchanging documents, every time I catch him watching me with an expression I shouldn't want to see. Every time I find myself lingering in his office longer than necessary, because leaving means going home to Marcus and staying means basking in the attention of a man who sees me as something other than a punching bag or a spy. Acting like, you're mine? Damiano finishes for me, and the possessiveness in his tone should make me protest, should make me lecture him about independence and autonomy, and how I don't belong to anyone. But instead I just stare at him, watching the way the setting sun catches in his dark eyes and makes them look almost black, infinite and dangerous, and entirely focused on me. Because you are mine, Serafina. You have been since the moment you walked into your interview wearing that navy dress with the pearl buttons and tried to pretend you weren't terrified, since the first time you organized my chaos into something manageable and looked at me like I was a puzzle you wanted to solve instead of a monster you needed to fear, since every damn day for the past 2 years, when you've sat outside this office being efficient and professional, and so carefully blind to all the darkness that surrounds me, proving that you're either the most naive woman I've ever met, or smart enough to know that survival sometimes means pretending not to see what's right in front of you. His confession washes over me like a wave, and I feel like I'm drowning in the implications of what he's saying, in the reality that my attraction to him hasn't been one-sided, that the tension I've felt crackling between us hasn't been my imagination but something mutual and dangerous that we've both been carefully ignoring, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that we've wanted this, wanted each other, wanted to cross every professional and ethical boundary that should exist between a boss and his secretary. The phone on his desk buzzes, and Damiano rises to answer it with visible reluctance, speaking in rapid Italian that I can't follow despite the semester of language classes I took in college, and I use the moment to drain my brandy in 3 burning gulps, because I need the courage it provides, need something to steady my nerves before I make the decision that's going to change everything. When he ends the call and turns back to me, there's satisfaction in his expression that makes him look every inch the dangerous man his reputation claims him to be. And I realize that whatever he's set in motion is already moving forward with or without my explicit consent, that Damiano Corvus is not a man who asks permission when he's decided something needs to happen. He's a man who acts and deals with consequences later. Your things are being collected as we speak. Marcus has been informed that you're working late on an urgent project and won't be home until tomorrow at the earliest, and the penthouse is being prepared for your arrival, he announces, coming to stand in front of me again, offering his hand to help me rise from the chair with an old-fashioned courtesy that seems incongruous with everything else about this surreal situation. So the only question remaining, Serafina, is whether you're going to trust me enough to let me keep you safe, whether you're brave enough to walk through the door I'm opening for you even though you don't know exactly what's waiting on the other side, whether you're ready to stop being a victim and start being something infinitely more dangerous, a woman under the protection of Damiano Corvus, which means anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first. And I promise you that nobody has ever successfully done that and lived to tell the story. I take his offered hand, feeling his fingers close around mine with firm possession, and I let him pull me to my feet. Let him guide me toward the door that leads to whatever comes next. And as we step into the elevator that will carry us to his penthouse and my new life, I glance back at my resignation letter still sitting on his desk, torn into pieces that scatter across the polished wood like the remnants of the woman I used to be before this moment. Before I traded one prison for what might be another, or might be something that looks like freedom even if it comes wrapped in darkness and danger, and I realize that whether I've just made the best decision or the worst decision of my life, there's no going back now because Damiano Corvus has claimed me as his, and something tells me that his form of possession is going to be infinitely more complicated and dangerous and intoxicating than any. The elevator ride to Damiano's penthouse feels both endless and far too brief, the numbers climbing steadily from 54 to 68, while I stand beside him in silence that feels heavy with unspoken implications, and I'm acutely aware of his hand still holding mine, his thumb tracing absent patterns across my knuckles in a gesture that might be meant to comfort me but instead sets every nerve ending on fire with awareness of just how much my life has changed in the span of a single conversation. The elevator doors open directly into his private foyer, because of course a man like Damiano Corvus doesn't share hallway space with neighbors or deal with the indignity of apartment numbers, and I step into a space that looks like it belongs in an architectural magazine, all soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that showcase the city sprawling below us like a glittering kingdom. The marble floors so pristine they reflect the sunset streaming through the glass, and the modern art on the walls probably costs more than most people earn in a lifetime. I've been to this penthouse exactly twice before, both times to deliver urgent documents that couldn't wait until morning, and both times I barely made it past the foyer before Damiano took whatever I was carrying and sent me away with barely concealed impatience. But now he's guiding me deeper into his domain with proprietary confidence, his hand on the small of my back in a touch that feels simultaneously protective and possessive. And I'm seeing his private sanctuary through entirely different eyes now that I understand I'm not just visiting but being installed here like a precious object he's decided to keep. "The guest suite is this way," he says, leading me down a hallway lined with what I'm fairly certain are original photographs by someone famous whose name I should probably know, and I follow him into a bedroom that's larger than the entire apartment I shared with Marcus, dominated by a king-sized bed with crisp white linens that look like they've never been slept in, and probably have thread counts that exceed my salary. The room has its own sitting area, with a cream-colored sofa positioned to take advantage of the western view, a bathroom visible through an open door that features marble and gold fixtures that gleam in the fading light, and a walk-in closet that currently stands empty but looks like it could house an entire department store's worth of clothing. "Your things should arrive within the hour, but if you need anything before then, toiletries, clothes, anything at all, just tell me and I'll have it brought up immediately," Damiano continues, and there's something almost nervous in his voice, as if he's worried I might bolt now that the reality of what I've agreed to is becoming concrete, as if he's forgotten that running from him would mean running back to Marcus, and between those two options there's really no choice at all. "This is too much," I hear myself saying, even though I'm not sure what exactly I'm referring to. The opulent room, the protection he's offering, the way he's looking at me like I'm something precious instead of broken, or maybe the overwhelming feeling of being cared for after so long surviving on scraps of basic human decency. I can't possibly stay in a room like this. It's too expensive and too nice, and I should probably just stay in a hotel or find a furnished apartment somewhere that Marcus wouldn't think to look. Somewhere that doesn't make me feel like I'm a burden or an obligation or... My rambling cuts off as Damiano steps closer, his hands coming up to frame my face with a gentleness that still shocks me every time he employs it. And his dark eyes search mine with an intensity that makes me feel like he's trying to read my soul, trying to understand the wounded creature he's brought into his home and figure out how to convince her she deserves to be here. You're not a burden, Serafina. You're not an obligation. And you're certainly not staying anywhere but here where I can guarantee your safety. So please stop trying to find reasons to leave before you've even properly arrived, he says with that tone of absolute authority that I've heard him use in board meetings when someone questions his decisions. The tone that brooks no argument and makes grown men scramble to agree with whatever he's just decreed. This room is yours for as long as you need it, which I suspect will be considerably longer than you're currently imagining, because your husband isn't just going to disappear overnight. And even after he's been handled, you're going to need time to recover, to remember who you were before Marcus Thorne spent 3 years systematically destroying your sense of self-worth. And I intend to be here for that process whether you think you deserve my help or not. His thumbs brush across my cheekbones, catching tears I hadn't realized were falling. And I'm struck by how someone with his reputation for violence can touch me with such careful reverence, as if I'm made of spun glass, and might shatter under anything more than the most delicate handling. Why? I whisper, because I still don't understand what I've done to deserve this level of intervention from a man who could have anyone, who doesn't need the complication of a broken secretary with a dangerous husband, who should by all rights be tired of my drama by now, instead of installing me in his guest room and making promises about handling Marcus like he's discussing a business merger instead of potential violence. Why do you care this much about what happens to me? I'm just your secretary, just someone who manages your calendar and answers your phone and pretends not to notice when men with guns visit your office. So why are you doing all of this? The questions hang between us, and I watch something flicker across his face, some emotion too complex to name, before he releases my face and steps back, creating distance that feels simultaneously safer and more painful than his proximity. Because I've watched you suffer in silence for 2 years, watched you come to work with new bruises you thought you'd hidden well enough, watched you flinch when anyone moves too quickly near you, watched the light in your eyes dim a little more each day until I wasn't sure there would be anything left to save, he says, turning to stare out the windows at the city below, his profile sharp and beautiful in the dying light, and his hands clench into fists at his sides as if he's physically restraining himself from violence. And because every time I saw evidence of what he was doing to you, I wanted to destroy him, wanted to make him understand what it feels like to be helpless and hurt and afraid, wanted to show him that touching what belongs to me comes with consequences that most men aren't strong enough to survive. The possessiveness in his words should alarm me, should remind me that Damiano Corvus is not a safe man, that his protection comes with strings attached that I don't fully understand yet. But instead I feel something warm unfurl in my chest, something that's been frozen for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, to be claimed, to matter enough to someone that they'd consider violence on my behalf. Before I can respond, there's a knock on the door, and a woman enters carrying several shopping bags that bear the logos of expensive boutiques I've walked past but never dared enter, and I recognize Vex immediately, Damiano's head of security, who stands at least 6 feet tall with platinum blonde hair shaved on one side, arms covered in intricate tattoos that disappear beneath the sleeves of her black tactical clothing, and eyes the color of winter ice that seem to catalog everything about me in a single sweeping glance. Your emergency wardrobe, boss's orders, since your actual belongings won't arrive for another hour, and he figured you might want to shower and change into something that doesn't belong to your soon-to-be ex-husband's idea of appropriate wife attire, Vex announces, setting the bags on the bed with surprising gentleness for someone who looks like she could bench press a car, and there's something almost approving in her expression as she looks between Damiano and me, as if my presence here has passed some test I didn't know I was taking. Also, FYI, the target is still at his office dealing with federal auditors who are being extremely thorough about his expense reports, and his phone has been appropriately monitored, so we'll know immediately if he tries to contact you or figure out where you've gone, so you can relax and stop looking like a rabbit about to bolt, Because trust me when I say that nobody gets past my security perimeter without losing significant amounts of blood in the attempt. The casual mention of violence should probably disturb me more than it does. But there's something oddly comforting about Vex's straightforward approach to personal safety, and I find myself offering her a tentative smile that she returns with a sharp grin that makes her look simultaneously dangerous and oddly friendly. "Thank you," I manage to say, gesturing at the shopping bags that represent more new clothing than I've bought for myself in years, because Marcus controlled our finances and considered my clothing budget an unnecessary expense when I already had perfectly functional items in my closet. "You didn't have to go through all this trouble for me. I could have just worn what I have until my things arrive. I don't want to be an inconvenience or cause extra work for anyone." The automatic apology feels familiar on my tongue. The reflexive minimizing of my needs that Marcus trained into me over 3 years of teaching me that asking for anything was selfish, that accepting help was weakness, that I should be grateful for the scraps of consideration he occasionally threw my way instead of expecting actual care or concern. "You're not an inconvenience. You're the boss's priority, which makes you my priority. And trust me when I say that buying you some emergency clothes is way more fun than most of what I do. So just say thank you and maybe try on the silk pajamas, because I'm pretty sure I nailed your size and style preferences based on stalking your social media from before you married that asshole." Vex responds with brutal honesty that's somehow refreshing after years of navigating Marcus's manipulations and carefully coded language, and she's already moving toward the door before pausing to add over her shoulder, "Also, there's a team stationed outside this dockware, 2 more in the private elevator, and another 3 monitoring the building's exterior access points. So you're literally safer here than you would be in a military bunker, which means you can actually sleep tonight without worrying about being murdered in your bed by your psychotic husband." She disappears before I can formulate a response to that cheerful announcement of my new, heavily guarded existence, leaving me alone with Damiano and several shopping bags full of expensive clothing I didn't choose and certainly don't deserve. She's intense, I observe unnecessarily, moving toward the bags with curiosity that wars with guilt about accepting so much from Damiano when I have nothing to offer in return except my continued secretarial services and the complications that come with my dangerous husband. But I appreciate her directness, I think, even if the constant reminders that Marcus might actually try to kill me are slightly terrifying rather than reassuring. I pull out a silk pajama set in deep emerald green that probably costs more than my monthly grocery budget, along with several other items that suggest someone with excellent taste and intimate knowledge of my size went shopping specifically for me. And I'm struck by the realization that Damiano has been paying attention to details about me that I didn't think anyone noticed anymore, remembering my preferences and style in ways that Marcus never bothered to do, even when we were supposedly happy. Vex takes her job very seriously, which is exactly why I trust her with your safety more than I trust anyone else in my organization, Damiano explains, finally turning from the window to watch me examine my new wardrobe, with an expression that seems almost vulnerable, as if my reaction to his gifts matters more than it should, as if he's worried I might reject this evidence of his care. And you should be at least somewhat afraid of what Marcus might do when he realizes you've left, because men like him don't handle losing control well, and from what I've learned about his personality profile, he strikes me as the type who would rather destroy what he can't have than accept defeat gracefully. The clinical assessment of my husband's psychology should probably upset me, but instead I just nod because Damiano's right, because I've seen the way Marcus reacts when things don't go according to his plans, the way his charming facade cracks to reveal something cold and calculating underneath, the way he views people as either assets to be utilized or obstacles to be removed. "I need to shower," I announce abruptly, suddenly desperate to wash away the day and Marcus's lingering touch and the feeling of being trapped that's been my constant companion for years. And Damiano nods understanding, moving toward the door to give me privacy, but pausing in the doorway with his hand on the frame. "There are fresh towels in the bathroom, and the water pressure is excellent, and take as long as you need." Because dinner won't be for at least another 2 hours? And Serafina? He waits until I meet his eyes before continuing. You're safe here, genuinely safe. And I need you to start believing that because I can see you're still waiting for the other shoe to drop, still expecting this to be some elaborate trap. But I promise you that the only thing waiting for you in this penthouse is the opportunity to remember what it feels like to breathe without fear. His words settle over me like a benediction, and I watch him leave before gathering the silk pajamas and retreating to the bathroom, where I can finally fall apart in private. The shower is exactly as incredible as Damiano promised, with water pressure that feels like a massage and temperature controls that actually work, and enough space that I don't feel claustrophobic. And I stand under the scalding spray for what might be 20 minutes or an hour, losing track of time as I scrub away the physical evidence of my old life. Marcus's, cologne that lingered on my clothes, the hairspray I used to carefully arrange my hair the way he preferred, the makeup I applied with strategic precision to hide bruises and create the illusion of a happy wife. When I finally emerge, skin pink from heat and vigorous washing, I feel like I've shed a layer of something toxic, and I slip into the silk pajamas that fit perfectly because, of course they do, because Damiano notices everything. And I'm confronted with my reflection in the full-length mirror that shows me a woman I barely recognize. Hair damp and curling without styling products, face bare of makeup for the first time in years, body wrapped in expensive fabric that feels like a caress instead of a constraint, and bruises finely visible without concealer to hide them, marking my skin like a map of survival and shame. I emerge from the bedroom to find Damiano in what appears to be the main living area, standing at the stove in the open-concept kitchen that occupies one corner of the massive space, and he's removed his suit jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves to reveal forearms that are more muscular than I'd imagined, and he's doing something with pasta, and what smells like garlic and herbs that makes my stomach remind me I haven't eaten since a piece of toast this morning before Marcus's explosion. You cook? I ask with genuine surprise, because it never occurred to me that a man who probably has staff to handle every aspect of his life would know his way around a kitchen, and he glances over his shoulder with a smile that transforms his usually serious face into something almost boyish. My nonna would rise from her grave and haunt me if I didn't know how to make a proper carbonara, he responds, and there's warmth in his voice when he mentions his grandmother. Affection that humanizes him in ways that make my chest ache because I'm seeing yet another layer of this complicated man who is so much more than his reputation suggests. Come sit and keep me company while I finish this, and you can tell me if there are any foods you hate or are allergic to, because I'm assuming your husband never bothered to ask about your preferences regarding anything, let alone something as basic as what you like to eat. The casual condemnation of Marcus's treatment of me should make me defensive, should make me want to protect the illusion that my marriage was normal. But instead, I find myself settling onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island and admitting truths I've never voiced before. He decided I was too fat about 6 months into our marriage, put me on a diet that was basically cottage cheese and celery, monitored everything I ate like I was a child who couldn't be trusted to make proper nutritional choices. I confess, watching Damiano's back stiffen at my words, his hands pausing in their efficient movement of tossing pasta with sauce. I learned to hide food in my desk at work, eating small amounts throughout the day when he wasn't around to criticize my portions or lecture me about maintaining my appearance for his professional reputation. And I genuinely can't remember the last time I ate something just because I wanted to, just because it tasted good and made me happy, without calculating calories or worrying about whether he'd notice if I gained a pound. The admission feels both liberating and humiliating, exposing yet another way Marcus controlled me, another method he used to keep me small and manageable and dependent on his approval. Damiano doesn't respond immediately, just finishes plating the pasta with movements that are slightly more aggressive than necessary, and when he sets the dish in front of me, a generous serving that smells incredible and looks like something from an expensive Italian restaurant, his expression is carefully controlled, but his eyes burn with that cold fury I'm starting to recognize as his response to learning new details about my abuse. Eat as much or as little as you want. And if you're still hungry after this, there's gelato in the freezer and fresh bread I can toast with butter and whatever else sounds good to you, because the only person who gets to decide what you eat and how much is you, and anyone who tries to control that basic aspect of your autonomy deserves to have their hands broken one finger at a time. He says with such casual menace that I actually believe he's capable of that specific violence. And part of me, a dark, wounded part that I'm not entirely proud of, wants him to do exactly that. The pasta is incredible, rich and creamy with perfectly cooked pancetta and a hint of black pepper that makes my taste buds sing with joy I haven't felt about food in years. And I eat with single-minded focus that's probably not attractive, but I don't care, because this is the first meal I've enjoyed without guilt or fear in longer than I can calculate. Damiano sits beside me with his own plate, and we eat in comfortable silence broken only by my occasional sounds of appreciation that make him smile with satisfaction. And there's something profoundly intimate about sharing a meal he prepared with his own hands, about being cared for in such a fundamental way. And I'm struck by the realization that this simple act of being fed and protected and allowed to exist without judgment is what I've been starving for far more desperately than I've been starving for actual food. Tell me about before, Damiano says when we've both finished eating, and he's poured us each a glass of red wine that probably costs more than my car payment. Tell me about Serafina before Marcus, before the bruises and the fear, before you learned to make yourself small to survive. Who were you when you still believed the world was safe? The question catches me off guard, and I have to think for a long moment because that version of me feels so distant, buried under layers of survival and compromise and slow erosion of self. But gradually I begin to remember and to speak about the girl who wanted to study art history, who spent weekends in museums, who believed love was supposed to make you feel bigger rather than smaller. And Damiano listens with complete attention while darkness falls outside the windows and the city lights begin to sparkle below us, like earthbound stars. Hours pass in conversation that flows easier than I expected, talking about everything and nothing. My childhood dreams, his complicated relationship with his family's business, my brief career in art authentication before I became his secretary, his love of Renaissance sculpture and Baroque architecture that surprises me with its cultured depth. And I find myself relaxing in ways I haven't relaxed in years, laughing at his dry observations about the art world's pretensions, sharing opinions without weighing every word for potential offense, existing without the constant vigilance that's been my default state for so long. When I finally glance at the clock and realize it's past midnight, I'm shocked by how quickly time has passed, how natural it feels to be here in Damiano's space, how right it seems to be sitting beside him while he tells me stories about his grandmother who taught him to cook and refused to be impressed by his growing power. I should let you sleep, he says reluctantly, rising from the sofa where we've been sitting for the past hour, and I follow him back toward the guest room with feet that feel heavier than they should, as if my body knows that being alone means confronting everything that's happened today, without the distraction of his presence. If you need anything during the night, my room is just down that hallway, and there's an intercom system if you don't want to leave your room but need something, and Vex is monitoring the security feeds so you're not alone even when you feel alone. He pauses at my door, and there's a moment of awkward tension where neither of us seems sure how to say goodnight, whether a handshake would be too formal or a hug too intimate given the strange territory we're navigating between employer and something undefined and dangerous. Thank you, I finally say, the words feeling inadequate for everything he's done today, everything he's offered without asking for anything in return, except my trust and my presence in his home. For the clothes and the food and the protection, but mostly for seeing me, for noticing what I tried so hard to hide, for caring enough to do something about it when you could have just looked away. My voice cracks on the last word, and before I can stop myself, I'm stepping forward and wrapping my arms around him in an impulsive hug that he returns after only a moment's hesitation, his arms coming around me with careful strength, holding me against his chest while I breathe in his scent and feel his heartbeat steady beneath my cheek. Sleep well, Serafina, he murmurs against my hair, and then he's releasing me and stepping back, and disappearing down the hallway toward his own room, leaving me standing in the doorway of my temporary sanctuary with my fingers pressed to my lips, and my heart racing with something that might be fear or anticipation, or the dangerous realization that I'm starting to feel things for Damiano Corvus that have nothing to do with gratitude, and everything to do with the kind of wanting that could destroy us both. I retreat into my room and climb into the unfamiliar bed, and I'm just starting to drift toward sleep when my phone, which I'd forgotten about entirely, begins vibrating with incoming messages, and when I reach for it with dread coiling in my stomach, I see 17 missed calls and 32 text messages from Marcus, each one escalating in anger and accusation, and the most recent one makes my blood run cold. "I know where you are, Serafina. I know exactly who you're with, and you're going to regret choosing him over me. You're going to wish you'd never tried to leave, because if I can't have you, then nobody can. And that includes your precious boss who thinks his money and his reputation can protect you from the consequences of your betrayal." The phone feels like it's burning in my hand as I stare at Marcus's threatening text message, my heart hammering so hard against my ribs that I'm certain Damiano must be able to hear it through the walls. And for a long moment I just sit there in the expensive sheets that smell like lavender and safety, frozen with the paralysis that Marcus has spent 3 years cultivating in me, that learned helplessness that makes prey animals stay perfectly still when predators circle close. My fingers hover over the screen, muscle memory almost making me type out an apology, almost making me beg him to understand that I didn't mean to upset him, that I'll come home if he'll just please calm down. But then I remember Damiano's hands on my face, his fury at my bruises, his promise that I'm safe here, and instead of responding to Marcus, I find myself padding barefoot down the hallway toward the light still visible under what I hope is Damiano's door. I knock softly, half hoping he won't hear, so I can retreat back to my room and pretend I'm brave enough to handle this alone, but the door opens almost immediately, and Damiano stands there in black silk pajama pants and nothing else, his chest bare, and revealing more tattoos than I'd imagined. Intricate designs that look like they tell stories I don't know how to read, swirling across his shoulders and down his ribs in patterns that make me want to trace them with my fingers. "Serafina?" His voice is rough with concern, and his eyes sharpen immediately when he sees my expression, reading the fear there with the same precision he applies to everything else. And before I can even explain, he's drawing me into his room and closing the door and guiding me to sit on the edge of his massive bed that looks like it's never been properly slept in despite the late hour. "Marcus knows I'm here," I manage to say, holding out my phone so Damiano can read the escalating series of messages that chronicle my husband's descent from confusion to anger to outright threats. And I watch his jaw clench as he scrolls through the vitriol, his free hand clenching into a fist that makes the muscles in his forearm flex in ways that should probably not be as distracting as they are given the circumstances. He says he knows where I am, says he knows I'm with you, and he's threatening to— I don't even know what he's threatening exactly, but the tone is bad. It's the same tone he uses right before he— I can't finish the sentence because saying it out loud makes it too real, makes the phantom pain of old injuries flare across my skin, and I'm shaking again, trembling with the conditioned fear response that Marcus has beaten into me over dozens of incidents that blur together into one continuous nightmare of trying to anticipate his moods and failing, every single time. "Look at me," Damiano commands, setting my phone aside and crouching in front of me so we're eye level, his hands on my knees in a grounding touch that pulls me back from the edge of panic, and his dark eyes hold mine with an intensity that makes it impossible to look away, even though part of me wants to hide from the concern I see there. Marcus can know whatever he wants to know, can threaten whatever he wants to threaten, but I promise you that he cannot reach you here, cannot hurt you here, and if he tries, he's going to discover exactly why people who cross the Corvus family tend to disappear into very deep holes that their loved ones spend years searching fruitlessly to find. The casual mention of making my husband disappear should horrify me, should make me recoil from this man who speaks about murder with the same tone other people use to discuss quarterly earnings. But instead I feel something like relief flooding through my system because someone is finally taking Marcus's capacity for violence as seriously as it deserves to be taken. Someone finally understands that restraining orders and police reports and good intentions won't stop a man like my husband when he's decided that I need to be punished for the crime of leaving. He's going to go to the police. He's going to tell them you kidnapped me, that I'm here against my will, that you're holding me hostage or coercing me or something equally terrible. I say, because I know Marcus and I know how his mind works, how he'll twist this situation to make himself the victim and Damiano the villain, how he'll leverage every connection and every favor owed to paint a picture of criminal enterprise and innocent wife caught in dangerous circumstances. He has friends in the department, prosecutors who owe him favors from cases he's helped them build, and he'll use every single one of those relationships to make your life difficult, to get warrants and investigations and media attention, focused on you. Because even if he can't get me back physically, he can destroy your reputation and your business and make you regret ever deciding to protect me from him. The words tumble out in a rush, fueled by intimate knowledge of Marcus's vindictive nature and his talent for manipulation. His ability to present himself as reasonable and concerned while systematically destroying anyone who opposes him through legal channels and social pressure. Let him try, Damiano says with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes, something cold and predatory in his expression that reminds me of exactly who I'm dealing with. That this man didn't build an empire by being soft or by backing down when challenged. I have lawyers on retainer who specialize in making problems disappear. I have judges who owe me considerably more significant favors than they owe some mid-level investment banker with delusions of grandeur. And I have documentation of every bruise you've shown up to work with for the past 2 years, every suspicious injury, every time you flinched away from sudden movement, all carefully cataloged by building security cameras that I may have specifically positioned to monitor your well-being after I realized what was happening to you. The revelation that he's been watching me that carefully, documenting my abuse with clinical precision, should probably disturb me more than it does. But instead I'm struck by the realization that Damiano has been building a case against Marcus for months, or maybe years, preparing for exactly this moment with the same strategic planning he applies to corporate warfare. Before I can process that information fully, his phone buzzes on the nightstand, and he rises to answer it with visible reluctance, speaking in rapid Italian that becomes increasingly clipped and angry as the conversation progresses. And when he finally ends the call and turns back to me, there's murder in his eyes. Your husband has apparently decided that if he can't have you, he's going to destroy me, and he's just filed a police report claiming that you've been kidnapped, that I'm holding you against your will in my penthouse, and he's managed to get a sympathetic detective to take his claims seriously enough that there are officers on their way here right now to perform a welfare check. The news should send me into another panic spiral, but instead I find myself standing and moving toward where my phone still sits on his bed, and I'm opening the camera app and turning the lens on myself before I can second-guess the decision that's crystallizing in my mind. Then let's give them exactly what they need to see, I say, my voice steadier than I expect, as I begin removing the scarf I'd wrapped around my neck before going to bed, exposing the bruises that have darkened overnight into spectacular shades of purple and blue that stand out starkly against my pale skin. Let's show them what Marcus Thorne did to his wife. Let's document every mark he left on me, every injury he caused that I've been hiding for years, and let's make it absolutely clear that I'm here voluntarily, that I'm seeking protection from a violent husband, that the only person they should be investigating is the man who used me as a punching bag whenever his fragile ego needed reinforcement. The words come out with a venom I didn't know I possessed, years of suppressed rage finally finding an outlet. And I watch Damiano's expression shift from surprise to something that looks like fierce pride as he understands what I'm offering. Not just my testimony, but my willingness to fight back, to stop protecting Marcus's reputation at the expense of my own safety. Are you sure about this? He asks, even as he's moving to position better lighting, his photographer's eye already calculating angles and exposure. And there's something gentle in his question despite the violence implicit in what we're about to do. Once we document this, once we show the police what he's done to you, there's no taking it back, no pretending it didn't happen, no maintaining the illusion of your perfect marriage, and Marcus will know that you've betrayed him in the worst possible way, by exposing his secrets to the world. The warning is unnecessary, because I've already made my decision, already crossed whatever invisible line separated victim from survivor, and I'm methodically removing my silk pajama top to reveal bruises that span my ribs, fingerprint-shaped marks on my upper arms, the fading yellow remnants of older injuries that map out a timeline of systematic abuse. Damiano photographs everything with clinical precision that must cost him emotionally, because I can see the muscle jumping in his jaw, can see the way his hands shake slightly as he documents proof of my husband's violence, and he's muttering what sound like prayers or curses in Italian under his breath. A litany of promised retribution that should probably worry me but instead makes me feel vindicated, seen, believed in ways that I haven't felt in years. When we're finished, when every visible mark has been captured from multiple angles, with metadata that will prove when and where the photographs were taken, he helps me back into my pajamas, with hands that are remarkably gentle given the fury rolling off him in waves, and he's pulling me against his chest in an embrace that feels simultaneously protective and desperate, as if he's trying to absorb my pain through proximity, trying to shield me retroactively from every blow I've already suffered. The police will be here in less than 20 minutes, he says against my hair, his breath warm on my scalp, and I can feel his heart racing beneath my cheek, matching the frantic rhythm of my own. When they arrive, you're going to tell them the truth, that you left your husband because he was abusing you, that you came here seeking protection from your employer, who offered you a safe place to stay, that you're remaining voluntarily, and that any claims otherwise are attempts by your abusive husband to maintain control over you through law enforcement. He pulls back enough to look down at me, his hands framing my face with that now familiar gentleness, and his eyes search mine with an intensity that makes my breath catch. They're going to want to interview you privately, without me present, and they're going to ask if I've coerced you or threatened you, or offered you anything in exchange for your cooperation, and you need to be prepared for how carefully they'll scrutinize your responses, looking for any sign that you're lying to protect me. I'm not lying, though, I point out, and there's something almost funny about the situation despite its severity, about how the truth of my circumstances is so much stranger than any fiction we could have invented. You are protecting me. I am here voluntarily, and the only person who should face criminal charges is Marcus for what he's done to me over the past 3 years. So when they ask me those questions, I'm going to tell them exactly that, and if my husband doesn't like it, then he can explain to a judge why his wife felt the need to flee their home in fear for her safety. The words feel powerful coming out of my mouth, transformative, as if speaking my truth with such clarity is somehow rewriting my internal narrative from victim to someone with agency, someone who makes choices rather than simply surviving circumstances. The intercom buzzes, and Vex's voice comes through crisp and professional, announcing that 2 police officers have arrived and are requesting access to verify my well-being, and Damiano gives me one last searching look before nodding to himself as if confirming some internal decision. Let them up, and make sure the building's legal counsel is standing by in case this turns into something more complicated than a simple welfare check. He instructs through the intercom, and then he's guiding me back toward the main, living area, his hand on the small of my back. And I'm struck by how this gesture that seemed possessive earlier now feels supportive, anchoring, reminding me that I'm not facing this alone even though I'll need to speak for myself. The police officers who emerge from the elevator are exactly what I expected. One older detective with tired eyes, who's probably seen too much domestic violence to be easily fooled, and one younger uniformed officer who keeps his hand near his weapon, as if he expects Damiano to suddenly become violent despite the perfectly civilized scene we present. Mrs. Thorne, the detective says, addressing me directly, and I notice he doesn't say my name as a question, but as a confirmation, as if he's already verified my identity through whatever databases police have access to. I'm Detective Morrison, and we're here because your husband filed a report claiming you've been kidnapped and are being held against your will by Mr. Corvus here, and I need to verify your safety, and determine whether you're remaining in this location voluntarily or under duress. I'm here voluntarily, Detective, seeking protection from my husband, who has been physically abusing me throughout our marriage, and Mr. Corvus has generously offered me safe accommodation while I figure out how to extricate myself from a dangerous situation. I say, with a calmness that surprises me, my voice steady and clear despite the way my hands want to shake. And I watch the detective's expression shift as he processes my statement, his cop instincts clearly noting the bruises visible on my neck and the way I stand just slightly angled toward Damiano, as if seeking shelter. I'd be happy to speak with you privately if you'd like, to confirm that I'm making this statement of my own free will and not under any kind of coercion, and I can provide you with photographic evidence of the injuries my husband has inflicted over the years if that would be helpful to your investigation. The younger officer looks uncertain, clearly not sure how to reconcile Marcus's claims of kidnapping with my very obviously voluntary cooperation. But Detective Morrison has the weary expression of someone who's seen this particular scenario play out too many times, where an abuser uses the legal system to harass a victim who's finally found the courage to leave. That would be very helpful, Mrs. Thorne, and yes, I would like to speak with you privately, standard procedure in these situations to ensure that you're not being influenced or threatened, he says, and there's something almost kind in his tone. Something that suggests he believes me already, but needs to follow protocol. Mr. Corvus, if you could give us the room for a few minutes, I'd appreciate it, and I promise we'll make this as quick and painless as possible. Damiano hesitates, clearly reluctant to leave me alone with law enforcement, even though logically we both know this is necessary. But eventually he nods and withdraws to what I assume is his home office, closing the door behind him, but not before shooting me a look that's equal parts concerned and supportive. The detective waits until Damiano is gone before settling into one of the leather chairs and gesturing for me to sit across from him, and his partner remains standing near the elevator, maintaining that careful cop vigilance that suggests they're not entirely convinced this isn't some elaborate setup. Okay, Mrs. Thorne, why don't you tell me in your own words what's been happening in your marriage, and why you felt the need to leave your home and come here specifically? Detective Morrison says, pulling out a small notebook that he flips open to a fresh page, and I take a deep breath before beginning the story I've kept hidden for so long. I tell him everything, or at least an edited version of everything that focuses on the physical abuse without going into the psychological torture, or the way Marcus used financial control and isolation to keep me trapped, and I show him the photographs Damiano and I took less than an hour ago, watching his expression harden as he sees the evidence of systematic violence mapped across my body. These are from just the past week, I explain, pointing to the freshest bruises, the ones that still throb with remembered pain. The older ones have mostly faded, but if you check with my employer's building security, you'll find footage of me arriving at work with suspicious injuries on multiple occasions over the past 2 years. Injuries I tried to hide, but that careful observation would have revealed. I pause, gathering courage for the next part, the admission that makes me feel simultaneously ashamed and defiant. My husband targeted me specifically because I work for Damiano Corvus. He married me with the intention of using me to gather information about Mr. Corvus's business operations, and when I couldn't or wouldn't provide that intelligence, he began using violence to punish me for my failure to be an effective spy. The detective's eyebrows rise at this revelation, and I can see him mentally recalculating the situation, understanding now that this isn't just simple domestic violence, but something more complex involving corporate espionage and strategic manipulation. That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Thorne, and one that would require substantial evidence to prove, he says carefully. But there's interest in his eyes, the kind of interest that suggests he's already thinking about how this could tie into other investigations, other patterns of suspicious behavior. Do you have any proof that your husband married you specifically to gain access to information about Mr. Corvus? Any communications or statements he made that would support this claim? He told me explicitly after our first anniversary when he'd been drinking and got angry that I couldn't tell him about Damiano's private meetings or offshore accounts or any of the operational details he seemed to think I had access to, I respond, the memory of that particular fight still vivid despite my best efforts to forget it. He said he'd made a mistake thinking I'd be useful, that I was too stupid or too loyal to be an effective intelligence asset, and that if I couldn't provide value as a spy, then I'd need to find other ways to justify my existence, which apparently involved being available for his sexual convenience and not embarrassing him in front of his colleagues. The words taste bitter coming out, exposing the transactional nature of what I'd tried so desperately to believe was love, revealing the cold calculation behind Marcus's courtship and marriage proposal. Detective Morrison writes rapidly in his notebook, and I can see the wheels turning behind his tired eyes, connecting dots that probably link to other investigations or intelligence that police have been gathering about Marcus's business dealings and connections. I'm going to be honest with you, Mrs. Thorne, your husband has been on our radar for a while now, connections to some individuals we've been investigating for securities fraud and market manipulation. But we've never had enough evidence to move forward with charges, he admits. And there's a calculating look in his expression now, as if he's weighing how much to share versus how much to keep confidential. If you'd be willing to provide testimony about his admission that he married you specifically to spy on your employer, that could be very valuable information. And combined with your documentation of domestic violence, it paints a picture of a man who's considerably more dangerous than the concerned husband act he's currently performing. Before I can respond, there's a commotion from the elevator, raised voices that cut through the penthouse's careful quiet, and suddenly Marcus is there, having apparently talked his way past building security, with whatever combination of charm and threats he's employed, and he's disheveled in a way I've never seen. Him, his perfect hair mussed and his expensive suit rumpled, and the expression on his face when he sees me sitting calmly with the detective is absolutely murderous. Serafina, thank God you're all right. I've been so worried about you, and I need you to tell these officers that this is all a misunderstanding, that you're coming home with me right now where you belong, he says, in that smooth, reasonable voice he uses when he wants witnesses to believe he's the rational one. And he's moving toward me with outstretched hands, as if he expects me to run into his embrace, as if the past 24 hours haven't fundamentally changed everything between us. Stay away from me, Marcus, I say, rising from my chair and backing away instinctively, my body responding to threat before my mind fully processes what's happening. And I see his expression flicker with rage before he smooths it back into concerned confusion. I'm not coming home with you, I'm not going anywhere with you, and if you come any closer, I'm going to start screaming, and I think Detective Morrison here would be very interested in why your presence terrifies me so much, if you're really the loving, concerned husband you're pretending to be. My voice is shaking but loud, clear enough that there's no mistaking my words for anything other than genuine fear and rejection, and I watch Marcus's mask slip further, revealing the monster underneath who doesn't like being defied in front of witnesses. You ungrateful bitch, he snarls, lunging toward me with hands outstretched in a gesture I recognize from 100 similar moments, and I don't even have time to flinch before Damiano is there, appearing from wherever he'd been monitoring the situation, and his fist connects with Marcus's jaw with a crack that sounds sickeningly final, sending my husband sprawling across the marble floor. You don't get to talk to her, you don't get to look at her, and you certainly don't get to threaten her in my home, Damiano says with deadly calm, standing over Marcus's prone form with violence radiating from every line of his body. And for a moment, I think he's going to kick my husband while he's down, going to give in to the barely leashed rage I can see burning in his eyes. But instead he steps back and looks at Detective Morrison with an expression of perfect innocence. I was defending Mrs. Thorne from an aggressive individual who just committed assault by attempting to grab her against her clearly stated wishes, and I'm certain the security footage will support my account of events, should Mr. Thorne wish to file charges against me for protecting a woman under my care from her abusive husband. The detective looks between Damiano and Marcus, who's slowly pulling himself to his feet with blood dripping from his split lip, and I can see him making calculations about what just happened, about whose story he believes, about which side of this situation he wants to be on when everything inevitably becomes public. Mr. Thorne, I'm going to need you to leave this building immediately, and I'd strongly suggest you retain legal counsel because based on what I've seen and heard tonight, you're likely to be facing charges for domestic violence, assault, and possibly even stalking given your unauthorized entry into this private residence, Detective Morrison says with professional firmness, and Marcus's expression transforms into something ugly and hateful as he realizes he's lost, that his attempt to use law enforcement as a weapon against me has backfired spectacularly. This isn't over, Serafina, not by a long shot, because if you think I'm going to let you destroy my reputation, destroy my career, destroy everything I've built, just because you couldn't handle a little discipline, then you're even more stupid than I thought. Marcus spits as the younger officer moves to escort him to the elevator, and his words carry the weight of promised retribution that makes my blood run cold despite the presence of police and Damiano's protection. You chose him over me. You chose this criminal over your husband, and you're going to regret that choice. You're going to wish you'd never tried to leave, because I'm going to take everything from you. I'm going to destroy him, and by the time I'm finished, you'll be begging me to take you back. The elevator doors close on his threats, cutting off his voice mid-rant, and suddenly the penthouse feels impossibly quiet, as if all the oxygen has been sucked out of the space, leaving behind only the aftermath of violence and the promise of worse to come. The days following Marcus's explosive confrontation blur together into a strange rhythm of normalcy, punctuated by moments of intense awareness that my life has fundamentally changed in ways I'm still processing. And I find myself settling into Damiano's penthouse with an ease that should probably concern me more than it does, waking each morning to the smell of espresso and fresh pastries, that he insists on making himself despite having staff who could handle such mundane tasks, spending my days working from his home office while he conducts business that I've learned not to ask too many questions about, and my evenings curled up on his sofa while he teaches me about the Renaissance artists I once dreamed of studying, his voice low and passionate as he describes Caravaggio's use of light and shadow with the same intensity he applies to everything else in his life. Detective Morrison has been true to his word, building a case against Marcus that involves not just the domestic violence charges, but connections to financial crimes and market manipulation that apparently run much deeper than I ever imagined. And I've spent hours giving statements to various investigators who seem genuinely committed to ensuring my husband faces consequences for his actions. But beneath the surface of this new routine, there's a tension building between Damiano and me that becomes harder to ignore with each passing day, each accidental touch that lingers too long, each look across the dinner table that communicates things we're both too cautious to voice aloud. The breaking point comes on a Thursday night 2 weeks after I moved into the penthouse, when Damiano returns home later than usual with blood on his shirt that he tries to hide by keeping his suit jacket on, despite the late hour and the warmth of the apartment. And I know without asking that something has happened, that the careful control he maintains over the violent aspects of his life has cracked in some significant way. And when I press him for information he initially refuses to share, his jaw set in that stubborn line I've come to recognize as his default, when he's trying to protect me from truths he thinks I can't handle. Tell me what happened, I demand with more courage than I feel. Blocking his path to his bedroom, where he's clearly planning to retreat and deal with whatever crisis has occurred in private, and I reach out to touch the dried blood on his collar with fingers that shake slightly, because I know this blood represents violence, represents the darkness that surrounds him like an aura, represents everything I should be afraid of, but somehow can't quite manage to fear. Tell me the truth, Damiano, because I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be shielded from the reality of your world. I'm a woman who's survived 3 years of systematic abuse, and I think I've earned the right to know when something dangerous is happening that might affect my safety or yours. My words hang between us in the charged air of the hallway, and I watch emotions flicker across his face. Surprise at my boldness, admiration for my refusal to be protected from truth, and something darker that might be desire or possession, or some complicated mixture of both that I've seen growing in his eyes whenever he looks at me lately. Your husband has been escalating his campaign to destroy me, using every connection and every dirty trick in his arsenal to undermine my business operations and paint me as a criminal who kidnapped his innocent wife. Damiano finally says, his voice rough with exhaustion and barely controlled rage, and he reaches up to loosen his tie with movements that are less controlled than usual, revealing the strain he's been under while trying to manage both the threats to his empire and his commitment to keeping me safe. Tonight, he made the mistake of hiring people to deliver a message, sending 3 men to one of my warehouses with instructions to burn it to the ground and make sure everyone knew it was retaliation for my interference in his marriage. And those men are currently learning the hard way that attacking Corvus property comes with consequences that most people aren't prepared to face. The casual mention of violence, of men being taught lessons that probably involve significant pain, and possibly death, should send me running back to my room to pack my belongings and flee this world of darkness and retribution. But instead I find myself stepping closer to him, close enough that I can smell the copper scent of blood mixing with his cologne, close enough that I can see the predatory darkness in his eyes that he usually keeps carefully masked. "Are you hurt?" I ask, because somehow that's the only question that matters in this moment. Not the moral implications of whatever he's done to Marcus's hired thugs, not the escalating war between my husband and my protector, but simply whether this man who's shown me more genuine care in 2 weeks than Marcus managed in 3 years has been injured while defending what's his. "Did they hurt you, Damiano? Because I need to know if you're bleeding under that shirt, if you need medical attention, if there's something I should be doing besides standing here asking questions about things I probably don't want detailed answers to." My hands move without conscious decision, reaching for the buttons of his dress shirt with fingers that fumble slightly because I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing or why, only that I need to see for myself that he's intact, that he hasn't paid too high a price for the ongoing protection he's providing me. He catches my hands in his, stopping my clumsy attempt at undressing him, and the touch of his skin against mine sends electricity racing up my arms that has nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the attraction I've been trying to deny since the first day I walked into his office 2 years ago. "I'm not hurt, Serafina. The blood isn't mine, and you don't need to take care of me or check for injuries or do anything except go back to your room and try to forget that you saw me like this, covered in evidence of violence, reminded of exactly who and what I am, beneath the expensive suits and the cultured conversation about Renaissance art." His words are meant to push me away, to create distance between us by forcing me to confront the reality of his nature. But instead they have the opposite effect, making me realize that I don't want distance, don't want careful boundaries, don't want to keep pretending that what I feel for him is simple gratitude or the dependent attachment of a victim to her rescuer, rather than something deeper and more dangerous that's been building since long before I finally had the courage to quit. "I don't want to forget," I whisper, and I'm standing on my toes now, closing the remaining distance between us with boldness that feels foreign and exhilarating, and I press my lips to his with all the desperate hunger of someone who's been starving for real connection, for genuine desire that's not twisted by control or violence or the need to diminish rather than celebrate. The kiss ignites something between us that's been smoldering for weeks or maybe months, and Damiano responds with a ferocity that steals my breath, his hands tangling in my hair while he backs me against the nearest wall, with controlled urgency that somehow manages to be both demanding and careful, as if he's afraid of breaking me even while claiming me with a possessiveness that should probably alarm me but instead makes me feel cherished and wanted in ways I've never experienced. "I don't want to go back to my room alone. I don't want to keep pretending that there's nothing between us, and I don't want you to protect me from who you really are because I think I might be falling for all of you, including the darkness, including the violence, including the parts of yourself you think I should fear." The confession tumbles out between kisses that grow increasingly desperate, and I feel him shudder against me, as if my words have struck something vital, cracked open some carefully maintained defense that he's used to keep distance between his world and anyone he might care about enough to destroy. "You don't know what you're saying. You don't understand what it means to choose this, to choose me." He protests even as his hands are sliding beneath my shirt. mapping the skin he's only seen marked with bruises. Touching me with a reverence that makes tears prick behind my eyes, because this is what being desired should feel like. This gentleness mixed with hunger. This sense of being precious rather than possessed. If you let me cross this line with you tonight, if you let me take you to my bed and claim you the way I've wanted to claim you since the moment you walked into my life, there's no going back to professional boundaries or careful distance, because I'm not a man who shares what's mine. And once I have you, Serafina, once I know what it feels like to be inside you and hear you say my name while you come apart beneath me, I'm never going to let you go. Not to Marcus, not to whatever safe, boring life you might have chosen if you'd never met either of us, not to anyone or anything that might take you away from me. Then don't let me go. I breathe against his mouth, and I'm pulling at his blood-stained shirt with hands that are steadier now, hands that know exactly what they want, even if my mind is still catching up to the magnitude of what I'm choosing. Take me to your bed, Damiano. Show me what it feels like to be wanted rather than used. Teach me the difference between violence that destroys and violence that protects. Make me yours in all the ways that matter, so that when Marcus finally faces consequences for everything he's done, I'll have something real to hold on to. Someone who sees all of me. The broken parts and the healing parts and the parts that are still figuring out how to be brave. And wants me anyway. The words feel like both surrender and claim, acknowledging the power dynamic between us, while also asserting my own agency in choosing this. Choosing him. Choosing to cross the line that separates employer from lover, protector from partner. The man who saved me from the man who might consume me in entirely different ways. He lifts me, effortlessly, my legs wrapping around his waist as he carries me down the hallway to his bedroom that I've never entered, kicking the door closed behind us with finality that makes my heart race with anticipation and nervousness in equal measure. And he lays me on his bed with a gentleness that contradicts the predatory hunger I can see burning in his eyes as he strips away his ruined shirt and stands before me like some dark god of vengeance and desire. Last chance to change your mind, last opportunity to run back to safety, because once I start touching you the way I want to touch you, once I hear you moan my name and feel you clench around me, I'm going to become the kind of obsessed that makes Marcus's possessiveness look like casual interest, he warns. And there's something almost vulnerable in his expression, despite the dominant way he's standing over me, as if he's genuinely afraid I might reject him, now that we've reached this precipice. I don't want to change my mind, I assure him, sitting up to pull my own shirt over my head, with hands that tremble slightly but don't hesitate, revealing the lace bra that Vex purchased for me during that first emergency shopping trip. And I watch Damiano's eyes darken with desire as he takes in the sight of me half undressed in his bed, voluntarily offering myself to him in ways that feel like reclaiming my body from Marcus's brutal ownership. I want this. I want you. And whatever comes after, whatever obsession or possession or complicated feelings develop between us, I'm choosing it consciously, with full awareness that you're not safe, and this isn't simple, and there will probably be consequences I can't fully anticipate. But none of that matters right now because for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm actually alive rather than just surviving. And I have you to thank for that. The words are barely out of my mouth before he's on me, claiming my lips in a kiss that tastes like desperation and promise, and his hands are everywhere, learning my body with the same intense focus he applies to everything else. And I surrender to the sensation of being worshipped rather than used, desired rather than merely tolerated. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I register that this moment, this choice, is going to change everything between us, in ways that will reverberate through whatever comes next, with Marcus and the legal system, and the complicated aftermath of choosing the darkness over the light. The morning after Damiano and I finally cross the line that's been beckoning us for months, I wake wrapped in sheets that smell like him and security, my body deliciously sore in ways that remind me of the difference between violence that destroys and passion that transforms. And for the first moment in 3 years, I feel something that might be peace settling into my bones. But that fragile tranquility shatters when Damiano's phone begins buzzing with the kind of insistence that signals crisis, and I watch him answer with the predatory alertness of someone who's always prepared for war. His expression darkening as he listens to whatever information Vex is delivering in rapid-fire sentences that I can hear from across the bed, but can't quite decipher. Marcus has made his move, apparently deciding that if he can't have you and can't destroy me through legitimate channels, he's going to try something more desperate and considerably more stupid, Damiano explains after ending the call. And there's something cold and final in his voice that makes me understand that whatever comes next has been anticipated, planned for, possibly even orchestrated by the man currently pulling on clothes with efficient movements that speak to years of dealing with crises that require immediate action. He's taken your sister, grabbed Lily from her apartment this morning, using a key you apparently didn't know he had copied, and he's demanding that you meet him at the warehouse district near the docks, alone and unarmed, claiming that if you don't show up within 2 hours, or if you bring police or any of my people, he's going to hurt her in ways that will permanently damage her. The words hit me like physical blows, terror flooding my system as I realize that Marcus has escalated beyond attacking me or Damiano to targeting the one person in this world I love more than I fear anything, my baby sister who's only 23, and innocent of all the complications that have entangled my life. And I'm already scrambling out of bed, reaching for clothes with hands that shake so badly I can barely manage buttons. I have to go. I have to meet him. I have to do whatever he wants because I can't let him hurt Lily. She doesn't deserve to suffer because of my choices, because I finally found the courage to leave him. I'm saying in a rush, panic overriding rational thought. But Damiano catches my wrists with gentle firmness, stopping my frantic movements and forcing me to meet his eyes, and I see something in his expression that's both reassuring and terrifying in its absolute certainty. This is exactly what he wants, Serafina. He wants you panicked and desperate and willing to sacrifice yourself to save your sister. But what he doesn't realize is that I've been preparing for exactly this scenario since the night you moved into my home. Since the moment I understood that Marcus Thorne was the kind of man who would hurt innocent people to maintain control over you, Damiano says with calm authority that somehow cuts through my panic. And he's pulling me close, pressing my face against his chest where I can hear his heartbeat steady and strong beneath my ear. We're going to get Lily back safely. We're going to end Marcus's ability to threaten you or anyone you love ever again. And we're going to do it in a way that ensures you never have to look over your shoulder, wondering if he's somehow escaped justice and is coming back for revenge. But I need you to trust me completely, need you to follow my instructions exactly, need you to be brave enough to walk into that warehouse wearing a wire and playing the role of the terrified wife one final time, while my people ensure that your sister gets out safely and your husband gets exactly what he deserves. The plan that Damiano outlines over the next 30 minutes is simultaneously simple and terrifyingly complex, relying on my ability to keep Marcus talking long enough for his security team to infiltrate the warehouse and extract Lily without alerting my husband to their presence. And I find myself being fitted with surveillance equipment so sophisticated it's invisible beneath my clothing, being coached on exactly what to say and how to react, being transformed into bait for a trap that's been carefully constructed to look like Marcus's victory, while actually ensuring his complete and total destruction. Vex drives me to the warehouse district in an unmarked car, her presence both comforting and nerve-wracking as she runs through the plan one final time, reminding me that I'll have armed backup within 20 feet at all times, even though I won't be able to see them. That Damiano will be listening to every word through the wire I'm wearing. That the moment Lily is secured, I need to drop to the ground, because what happens next will involve violence that I shouldn't witness even though it's being committed on my behalf. You're stronger than you think. Stronger than he ever let you believe you were. And today you're going to prove that to yourself by walking into his trap and turning it against him. Vex tells me before I exit the vehicle, and there's something almost proud in her expression, as if I've somehow earned her respect through my willingness to face my abuser one final time in order to protect someone I love. The warehouse is exactly as desolate and threatening as I expected. All rusted metal and broken windows and shadows that could hide anything, and Marcus is waiting in the center of the space with Lily bound to a chair beside him, her face tear-streaked and terrified, but otherwise appearing unharmed. And the relief I feel at seeing her alive and whole nearly buckles my knees before I remember that I need to be strong, need to play my role perfectly, need to give Damiano's team the time they need to move into position. I'm here, Marcus. I came alone like you demanded, so please let Lily go. She has nothing to do with any of this. She doesn't deserve to be punished for my mistakes. I call out, my voice carrying across the empty space with surprising steadiness, given the terror coursing through my veins. And I watch my husband's expression transform into something triumphant and cruel as he realizes I've apparently capitulated to his demands. You think it's that simple, Serafina? You think you can just show up and I'll release your sister, and we'll all go our separate ways like you didn't destroy my reputation, didn't ruin my career, didn't choose that criminal over your own husband? Marcus spits, circling me like the predator he's always been, and I can smell alcohol on his breath mixed with something that might be desperation. The scent of a man who's realized he's lost everything and has decided that if he can't win, he'll at least inflict maximum damage on his way down. You're going to come back to me? You're going to recant everything you told the police? You're going to stand beside me and explain that it was all a misunderstanding caused by your mental instability? And if you do that convincingly enough, if you publicly humiliate yourself and that bastard Corvus, then maybe I'll let both you and your sister walk out of here alive. I'll do it. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't hurt her. I lie with an ease that surprises me, channeling every ounce of the performance skills I developed over 3 years of pretending our marriage was normal, and I see Marcus's shoulders relax slightly as he believes he's won, as he thinks he's successfully terrorized me back into submission. I'll go on television. I'll tell everyone that I was confused and scared, and that you never hurt me, that Damiano Corvus manipulated me and took advantage of my vulnerability. Whatever story you need me to tell, I'll tell it convincingly enough that people will believe me, and your reputation can be salvaged. The words taste like ash in my mouth, but I watch through my peripheral vision as shadows move in the warehouse rafters, as Damiano's people get into position with the silent efficiency of professionals who've done this kind of extraction countless times before. And I keep talking, keep Marcus's attention focused entirely on me, while his hostage is carefully being freed by someone I can't quite see but trust completely. You always were a convincing liar when properly motivated. Marcus sneers, moving closer with overconfidence that comes from believing he's in control, and I can see Lily's eyes widen as her bonds are cut silently behind Marcus's back, as strong arms lift her from the chair and spirit her toward the warehouse exit, with movements so smooth and practiced that my husband doesn't notice he's lost his leverage. Maybe after you've cleaned up this mess, after you've destroyed Corvus's reputation the way you destroyed mine, I'll consider taking you back, though you'll have to work very hard to earn back even a fraction of my trust after this betrayal. His hand reaches out to grab my arm, fingers digging into my flesh with familiar brutality, and I see the exact moment he realizes something has gone wrong, the instant he turns to discover that Lily's chair is empty, and his insurance policy has vanished. And the expression that crosses his face is something beyond rage, beyond calculation, into territory that looks like pure madness. You stupid bitch. You walked in here wired. You brought his people. You thought you could outsmart me. Marcus snarls, and his hand is suddenly holding a gun that he must have had concealed. The barrel pointed at my chest with intent that's absolutely murderous. But I remember Vex's instructions and I drop to the ground as the warehouse explodes into controlled chaos. Gunfire that I register as coming from Damiano's security team, neutralizing the threat Marcus represents. And through the ringing in my ears, I hear Damiano's voice shouting my name with panic that strips away every layer of his usual control. When the shooting stops and the silence that follows feels deafening, I open my eyes to see Marcus on the ground, with Damiano standing over him. And there's blood spreading across the concrete floor that tells me my husband is either dead or dying, and I should feel something, grief or relief or horror. But instead I just feel empty, hollowed out by the realization that the man I once believed I loved was willing to kill me rather than let me be free. was so consumed by need for control that he would have destroyed both me and my sister rather than accept defeat. Damiano is pulling me into his arms before I fully process what's happened, his hands running over my body, checking for injuries with desperate thoroughness. And he's murmuring things in Italian that sound like prayers and promises and declarations I'm not sure I'm ready to hear yet. But I let myself collapse against his chest because the adrenaline is fading, and the reality of what almost happened is crashing over me in waves that threaten to drown me. It's over, Serafina. He can't hurt you anymore, can never threaten you or your sister again, and I know this isn't how you probably wanted it to end, with violence and death instead of justice through legal channels. But Marcus made his choice when he decided to escalate to kidnapping and attempted murder. And now you're free in every way that matters, Damiano says against my hair. And I can feel him shaking with the aftershocks of fear, with the knowledge that he almost lost me, that Marcus's bullet could have found its mark before his people could neutralize the threat. The aftermath unfolds with the kind of efficiency that suggests Damiano has planned for every contingency. Police arrive to find a clear-cut case of self-defense, with Marcus having fired first and multiple witnesses who can testify to the kidnapping and threats. And Detective Morrison looks almost satisfied as he surveys the scene, as if this outcome, while messier than a trial would have been, at least ensures that my husband will never hurt another woman the way he hurt me. Lily is checked by paramedics and cleared of serious injury beyond psychological trauma that will require therapy and time to process, and she clings to me with a desperation that makes my heart ache, because I realize how close I came to losing her. How Marcus's need to punish me almost destroyed the one pure relationship left in my life. But she's safe, and I'm safe, and the monster who terrorized us both is gone, and somewhere in the wreckage of this terrible day I find something that might be the beginning of hope. 3 months later, I stand in Damiano's penthouse wearing a dress the color of midnight that cost more than my old monthly rent. And I'm watching the city lights sparkle below like promises of all the nights still to come. And I realize that the woman I see reflected in the window is someone I barely recognize. She stands straighter, smiles easier, doesn't flinch when approached from behind, has learned that love can exist without violence, and that protection doesn't have to mean possession, even though the ruby ring on my finger suggests that Damiano Corvus has claimed me as thoroughly as any man could claim another person. We married quietly last week in a ceremony that was equal parts legitimate union and Mafia coronation, and I walked down an aisle scattered with white roses toward a man who looks at me like I'm simultaneously the most precious thing he owns and the most dangerous weapon in his arsenal. And when I said my vows, I meant every word, because I've learned that sometimes the monsters make the best protectors. That cages built from obsessive devotion feel nothing like cages built from control. That the man who sees your darkness and loves you anyway is worth infinitely more than the man who tried to break you into something manageable and small. My life with Marcus was a prison constructed from lies and violence, a slow death by increments that almost destroyed everything I was, or could have been. But my life with Damiano is a throne built from truth and choice, and the understanding that real power comes from standing beside someone as an equal rather than beneath them as a possession. And as I turn from the window to see my husband approaching with that predatory grace that still makes my heart race, but now with anticipation rather than fear, I understand that I didn't trade one cage for another, but instead walked through fire to find something that looks like freedom even if it comes wrapped in darkness and danger, and the complicated reality of loving a man whose empire is built on foundations I still don't fully understand and probably never will. But that's okay, because he loves me with a ferocity that makes Marcus's obsession look like casual interest, protects me with a ruthlessness that ensures I'll never again wake up afraid of the person lying beside me, and sees me, truly sees me, in ways that make me feel like the woman I always had the potential to become if someone had just believed I was worth saving, worth fighting for, worth the considerable risk he took in bringing me into his world and making me his queen.